can't and won't are just words, and nobody can predict what anyone is able to do tomorrow, or what will happen to anyone, or what their path will be.
Fran Brown is a woman of many talents.
I personally hate it when people are like, oh, they're so inspirational. It's inspiration porn
totally.
does my head in. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here because I am a professional athlete.
Not only is she a professional percussionist, she's also a trained circus artist, a skydiver, and a student of physiotherapy.
You are your book. You are your person. You write your own story, but don't let somebody else write your story for you.
Hey everyone, Jamie here. Welcome to Flame Bearers Unedited, a brand new series bringing to you largely unedited conversations. We heard you loud and clear. You want to hear more stories of more elite women athletes from around the world. So we're going to deliver. In Unedited, we're going to bring you completely unfiltered conversation. We hit start, we have our conversation, we hit end. What we're gonna see though is slightly different because we're not gonna have all the traditional bells and whistles that you're used to in Flame Bearers production. So let's jump in.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Fran Brown. I'm a Paralympic cyclist. I'm currently part of the British cycling team, and I'm also a physio. When I'm not riding my bike, I work as a physiotherapist, and I come from a background of several sports. I came through triathlon, and before that, paraclimbing.
So catch us up to speed, because I know that you were the paraclimbing lead world champion. For people who haven't heard your story, how did you first get into sports, and what is this evolution? How have you gotten to where you are today?
So my journey started back at school when I lived in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, and I'm a twin. And in typical twin competitiveness, my twin was very good at hockey. So you're kind of mainstream sports. So I didn't want to do the same thing, because as twins, you are always endlessly compared. So rather than play hockey, I took the opportunity. My school ran a Wednesday afternoon activity program, and one of the options was outdoor sports, like outdoor education. So that included climbing, surfing, mountain biking, hiking, things like that, orienteering. So I jumped straight into that, got really hooked on rock climbing. So my school was lucky enough to also have like a little indoor climbing wall.
Oh, cool.
And one of our teachers was very pivotal in kind of encouraging me to do that, and found me a youth climbing series that I could enter to like be competitive. I think he noticed that I had a bit of a competitive edge. And so I'd relish the prospect of, rather than just taking part on a Wednesday afternoon, I'd compete. So I competed in the British youth series, I think when I was like 13, 14, 16.
Wow, early age.
I did okay. I got to national finals every year, but I didn't I didn't quite have the facilities in Cornwall to train for the stuff that we were then competing on. But that sparked my urge. And then my dad was an outdoors instructor. Well, anyway, he did things like Duke of Edinburgh and like worked with the youth service. And he had a boat when we were kids. So we learned to sail on a yacht. And then when he got too old to climb on and off the yacht easily, because he got arthritis in his knees, we got a caravan and tents, and then spent a lot of time on Dartmoor hiking and like relishing the outdoors with my family kind of every weekend and every school holiday that way. So cool. I got hooked on the outdoors basically from quite a young age. And then I went to university, and during that time was part of the uni climbing club, but I didn't compete. At the time, climbing was a social activity, so revolved around weekends away with the uni team, the uni group, quite a lot of pub time, alongside I did some theatre stuff with the uni theatre group as well.
Cool.
And then, my life took me, finished uni, went to London, got a job in London, working in the West End, worked my way up in the West End from like deputy head of electrics in a theatre, so not so much working on shows, to then deputy head of lighting on shows. And it was on a show that I had my accident. I was able-bodied before that, and I effectively had a fall and dislocated C4, 5 and 6 in my neck. It was a fall from a height off a ladder. And no one was at fault as such. I didn't follow a method statement, and there wasn't anyone to fit the ladder as well. So it was a combination of errors. I don't blame anyone. It's one of those things that happened. But as a result, I suffered a spinal cord injury at C4, like an incomplete spinal cord injury. So initially, I had less movement in my legs and my hands and arms and breathing. And then over time and rehab, I gained back a bit of the use of my legs. Like I can walk now with leg braces. So I wear braces below my knees. And I still have hand impairment. So I can't straighten my hands fully, like completely flat. And I have a grip impairment as well. And my core and things, there's various things that are affected.
Okay.
So I had that injury, and I when I moved to London, I got straight back into the climbing scene, found the bouldering wall to go to for the social aspect. I enjoy it. It was my keep fit. It was my gym rather than going to the gym to run on a treadmill or anything like that. And I decided that I'd get back into that because my friends are still climbing. There's nothing changed in that respect. I just was physically limited. And yeah, just was climbing for fun really, in the social aspect and the keep, like to try and get back into some fitness and shape. And that helped with my rehab. It helped me get back on my feet eventually to walk. And then one of my climbing friends found the thing about, or saw a flyer, I think, for the British paraclimbing series and was like, oh, you used to compete many years ago and you're competitive. Maybe you should do this.
Flyer changed your life.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I didn't know anything about it. I went to the first one and went through the classification stuff. And then, did okay that first year, got selected for the World Championships. And in between, I'd gone back to work after my accident in a couple of different roles where I oversaw some reprogramming and electrics changes for shows that were already on. My passion was to be a chief electrician on a big West End show or a touring show, and I couldn't do that. So I decided I wanted to retrain, and I wanted to retrain as a physio. But it took a couple of years to get into uni. So I needed to do a couple of extra bits of access qualifications and things. Mm-hmm. So I set about doing those. And then the summer of 2012 was obviously the 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. So I got recruited, and to be honest with you, I can't really remember how. I think I signed up to something that was a wheelchair dance introduction day that they were running for people for the volunteer ceremonies cast.
Wow.
For 2012. Okay. And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. I turned up, did that workshop, which I can't really remember much about. And then afterwards got an email saying, would you like to come to this other audition for a circus performer kind of role, like an aerialist role in the actual Paralympic ceremony. And this was a paid role. And I was like, yeah, right, I'm not doing anything. Sure. I think they'd noticed I was a climber. So I turned up to that audition, which was involved flying around in a harness and stuff, and them asking you to spin 360 and do this, that, and the other. And that was crazy fun.
So cool.
I don't know if I was any good, but they gave me the role.
I'm sure you must have been good if you got the role.
So I spent that summer working on the Paralympic ceremonies for the games as an aerialist. So training in the circus space, and then training in at 3 Mill Studios, and then training in the stadium, and then performing in the opening ceremony. And at the same time, doing all the bits and pieces I needed to go to uni that September, and trying to train for my first World Championships as a climbing man.
Wow.
So it was a bit of busy.
So much.
Yeah, so then I did that first Worlds and I won. There was only 3 people in my classification, so to be honest with you, it feels a little bit like a hollow victory. You beat 2 other people. But I enjoyed it, and that was the main thing. And that was kind of my introduction into parasport from back when I was an able-bodied climber.
Fran, thank you so much for walking us through all of that and for just keeping it so real. We have listeners in 56 countries, many of whom are aspiring Paralympians, some of whom have recently gone through their own accidents, trying to rework their identity and who they are in this new body to them. So what advice would you give to individuals who are in that state?
You find yourself with a lot of people telling you what you can't do and telling you the things you won't be able to do. So actually figure out what you want to be, because that can then guide what you try and what you do. Can't and won't are just words, and nobody can predict what anyone is able to do tomorrow, or what will happen to anyone, or what their path will be. I was in rehab with so many people who were told, you'll never walk again, who then did or didn't. And it seemed like there was no predictor accurately to that. Find your values, find who you want to be. If it doesn't look exactly like it looked before, that's fine. But there's a way of somehow finding a way into integrating that into your new life and your new abilities. And it might look differently, but ultimately you're probably similarly going to have the same circle of friendship and group and support system around you. So pull on those and pull on other people's ideas. It was other people's ideas that found me the paraclimbing route.
So how did you get from that moment to where you are today, a Paralympic silver medalist, a 9-time paracycling world champ?
So doing 2012 actually inspired me. We were able to go and see some of the Olympics as well as the Paralympics. I was inspired by the triathlon and inspired by all the para sports. And I was like, oh, man. And I saw, having then been to para climbing worlds, the disparity of level between para climbing worlds at the time and the Paralympics and what competing for Team GB as part of the Paralympics. Bear in mind, para climbing is going to be in the LA Games. So things have changed and move on. But at the time, we had a very loose classification system that bundled people in together in somewhat random ways. We didn't have a coaching structure in the UK. They now have an amazing team. I think they've just selected something like 34 athletes for this year.
I saw that. Huge.
Yeah, we had at the time we had a very small team without really any coaching structure. It was a new endeavor. We didn't have any UK sports support, so you didn't have any physio, any funding, it was all self-led effectively. And then you're looking at like a Paralympic sport that has a full team with full structure, coaching, psychology, nutrition, the best to be the best. And I wanted to be the best at whatever it was I was doing. And I kind of realized that within climbing at that point, that I wasn't going to be, I might be the best, but I wasn't professional. That was what made me be like, okay, well, maybe there's another sport for me that I can pursue that is a Paralympic sport that would mean I could compete for the Paralympic GB team, which was my goal. They now run central ones. So Paralympics GB runs some. They're just running them, I think now, or they've just finished them for each cycle, where you can go and meet loads of sports. And then they'll kind of be like, oh, you might be good at rowing. Do you want to try rowing? Or you might be good at this. So that wasn't really running then. So I went to triathlon. And I also went to cycling at the same time. Because I was like, well, I've learned to ride a bike now. May as well talk to cycling. And basically triathlon showed quite a lot of interest in me and helped me figure out how to ditch the crutches running. Okay. Which was involved getting different leg braces and stuff that are way more supportive and provide me with more stability and propulsion going forward, so I don't have to lean on the crutches with balance. Didn't lead to no falls. There were some epic face plants, but it did mean I could run. So I went to that Talent ID and they put me on their foundation program, which is basically kind of like talent development. So they just give you a bit of coaching. You're still at home, you're still not part of a centralized squad, just at home. And they send you like, here's a training plan. We'd like you to try and follow this training plan. And then log your sessions online. So you record like the heart rate and that you did the sessions. So I did that for a few months. And then we had a couple of weekends where we'd go up and like be in Loughborough with the squad. And they'd like retest us and see if we actually got better from doing the training program or not. And I was doing this alongside uni because obviously I was now a physio student, so a full-time student. Then they were like, okay, well, you should do British Championships that year. So I did. And then the following year they said, oh, we'd like to get you internationally classified. So to do that, you have to go to a race. So they sent me to European Championships in Kitzbühel. And at the same time, cycling sent me to classification in Ostend. At a World Cup with their foundation squad. So I kind of had both in the same year, which was really cool. Went through classification with both and came out in the same class as I'd been nationally, so nothing changed there. Did Europeans and I came second at Europeans. And then I did cycling. I did the World Cup, won the road race and the time trial, but again, limited competition. Applied for World Championships for both, because once I could apply to be like invited to go to World Championships because I wasn't on the squad. Got invited to both, but then realised that cycling World Championships was a week, maybe it was 10 days before triathlon World Championships. And cycling World Championships were in South Africa, so there was no opportunity to run or swim because you weren't allowed out the hotel compound. So I was like, okay, well, I'll dedicate a year to see what happens. I moved to Loughborough. Just after I moved to Loughborough, my coach left. So good start. But then it worked out really well. Like the squad were great. Loved being part of the squad there. The only thing that didn't work for me was I really struggled with the set sessions. So there'd be like a swim on a Tuesday morning and a bike on a Tuesday afternoon. Like as a PTS2 and a tetraplegic, I struggled with fatigue from doing a hard swim into a hard bike. So I wanted to move that session to another day. And I just couldn't in that environment. I did a year there. I did progress. I came second at Worlds that year. But the combination of that frustration with not being able to move timings and sessions around.
Lack of flexibility, yeah.
Yeah. And then also my dad passed away that October.
I'm so
kind of
sorry.
drew me back home. So I moved back to London and cracked on with, carried on training. The squad were fine. Like I say, half the athletes were remote. You didn't have to be in Loughborough. And I was based in East London, so I then had access to the 2012 Olympic Park, which by this point was open.
Wow.
I could swim in the Olympic pool. I could use the cycle track. So I actually had a really good training environment set up there. Did all of that, got to 2019, so the following year, and did enough to get selected, pretty much automatically selected for my first Paralympics in 2019. So I knew I'd been selected 7 months before the team was supposed to be announced. So great. Like, I won my first world championship that year. But around about the same time, I started having some gut problems. So I'd be like running and my gut would be like, don't like you, I've got guttache. And it was enough initially for me to just be like, nah, ate something funny. Yeah. But it went on and on and on to the point that I was like, something's not right here. And then some investigation that winter showed I had Crohn's disease. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I was put on medication and everything looked like it had, like, stable with the medication. And I was back training, no problem. Went on a camp in 2020, like January, February, supposedly January, February, March to Spain. And obviously we all know what happened in February and March 2020. Probably don't need much reminding.
No, thank you. Please do not remind us.
I got a phone call that said, you need to get out of Spain because you're going to be stuck there if you don't leave by tomorrow because they're going to close the borders. So that's how that camp ended. Came back to the UK. At that point, the games hadn't been cancelled. Well, sorry, postponed. But then they were. And the stress of all of that caused my Crohn's to flare up, and to the point that I then spent the whole of that summer unable to train. So it was probably a blessing that the games got postponed, because I definitely wouldn't have made them. And then on the date that the games should have opened, I ended up having surgery to have a stoma. So like, I've got an ostomy, so my gut exits through my tummy. So I have a bag on my tummy rather than it exiting the natural way. At the time I was like, oh man, how am I going to swim with this? How am I going to run with this? Turns out it's absolutely fine. They stay stuck. They're waterproof. Literally no problem. And then now when I run or ride, I don't have to think, how am I going to have an accident because my gut's bad. It took away all of that stress. It took a little while to come back from, but I came back for the delayed games. But because of the COVID, well, we won't mention it, the thing that shall not be named, I was high risk because of my spinal cord injury, because I don't have a proper cough function because the muscles in my chest, some of the muscles in my chest are paralyzed. So I was basically shielding. So I didn't leave the house until I got my second COVID vaccine that April. So the April of the year of the games. So I didn't swim for basically a year.
Wow.
And I only ran on a treadmill and cycled on a turbo. I was still fit enough to go to 2021. I went to Tokyo, but I ended up coming fourth. I went in as favourite because I'd been the world champion the last time there was one. But obviously with everything that happened in between,
haven't been able to compete. Totally.
Yeah, I came fourth. And at the time I was disappointed with that. I really, really wanted a medal. I've come around now to think, do you know what? I am proud of it. I'm proud I made it, because it would have been so easy a million times to throw the towel in.
Sure.
I'd just be like, this is too hard. It's too unfair that everyone else can swim around and I can't. Because people got back in pools a lot sooner. Yeah, I've come to be proud of it, but at the time it was a disappointment. And then post-Tokyo, I had a year where I couldn't really run without my gut still being kind of pissed off at me. For want of a better word. I'd get like pain and things running. So I decided...
I have a very pissy gut too. Yes.
I mean, I think it's the mechanical, when you run, it jiggles up and down, right? So doesn't like it. At that point, decided that actually cycling was probably a more sensible sport. So within my classification in triathlon, I'd always been the fastest cyclist by a long way. So I'd always come off the bike first. So I'd always set the fastest time. When I went all the way back in 2016, 17 talent identification, cycling had been like, oh yeah, we'd quite like you. But then I chose triathlon.
You chose tri, yeah.
So I was like, oh, maybe cycling would, I don't think I burned the bridge. Maybe cycling would actually kind of have me back, or not have me, give me a try. So I contacted them and asked about, there's a talent transfer scheme between sports in the UK. So once you're on a world-class program, you can, if you're good at something else.
Oh, cool.
Or you think you might be good at something else, or they do. You can sort of be either poached or move yourself, or you can request a trial effectively. So I requested to go to cycling. I went to and cycling said, okay, give it a year, race this year, do the World Cups and do World Championships in 2022. And triathlons were happy, supported this. So triathlon were amazing. So they continued to support me for that whole year, even though for most of it, I didn't run or swim. And then at the end of the year, having been successful at World Championships, they then offered me a place on the cycling squad, and I transferred over effectively.
I want to ask you about this. You've mentioned a couple different times that the fields in para sports are so small. How do we change that? How do we get more opportunities for para athletes and then more para athletes into those opportunities?
Now, that's the golden question, because I welcome way more competition. I think females especially, and especially, bearing in mind, I sit at the more impaired end of ambulance sport. So there is the wheelchair class in triathlon, and there's hand cycles and trike riders in cycling that are effectively more impaired, considered more impaired than myself.
Okay.
But I'm the lowest class of somebody who would ride a two-wheeled normal bicycle with adaptions. And I was the lowest class of running triathletes.
Sure.
And I think we really struggle because there's probably ultimately not that many females with disabilities that fall into those classes that were sporty before in the relevant sports. I think the men do better because they have some of the military influx.
Okay.
Most 3 people in my classification of 10 of us in Tokyo in triathlon were military females that had limbs blown off in the military. So
okay.
I do think some of it comes from that. I think some of it comes from potentially there's a slightly different culture in that females are less competitive, like naturally. That they might be a more, if you were active before your injury, you might go back to a more gym environment than to a sports competitive environment.
I am so competitive. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Same. That's how I ended up in.
Yeah.
But also, I just don't know that whether I just don't think we appeal to we look in the right places. Necessarily.
Where should we look? Yeah, where should we be looking?
Well, rehab facilities, spinal injury units, we're not very good at finding people. I don't know whether that's that we're not. I think parasport as a whole is very much, at least from my exposure to it in the UK, marketing-wise. If you're blind, the media produced shows a lot of visually impaired athletes. So it might be a tandem. It might be somebody running with a guide. It's very obvious.
Okay.
So if you're blind, you're like, oh, I can do athletics. Oh, I could ride a tandem. Oh, I can play goalball. If you're missing a limb, poster people for parasports, they love an amputee with a blade because it looks amazing, or a swimmer with one arm because it looks
visually compelling.
So therefore, if you have an injury like that, it's quite easy to clock, I could do that. Whereas they don't tend to show neuro impairments. So you might see a wheelchair racer and everyone goes, oh, they're paralyzed. So you can do wheelchair racing, right? Or play wheelchair basketball.
Sure.
But beyond that, the whole cerebral palsy, weird and wonderful neuro impairments, the spinal injuries that are ambulant, we're not a pretty disability to portray. So even in the media coverage of the games, there wasn't a lot of focus. There is never a lot of focus on those athletes. Yeah. Even if they're successful, the poster people for the British teams and for other countries' teams, the universal media appraisal of it is the very visible, very obvious disabilities. Sure. And I think, therefore, people who are born with CP, people who acquire a neuro impairment, maybe just get lost not thinking that parasport is for them.
Wow, okay.
And unless you dig deep and watch the Paralympics and therefore understand, and to be fair, our coverage of the Paralympics has got quite good at explaining classifications and explaining impairments, but that takes you having to sit down and watch it. If you don't think if it doesn't appeal to you because you don't think those sports are for you, how do you get into? I think we need to be better with our messaging at that level, to be honest with you. And that's the easiest answer I have to that, is that actually there needs to be a broader spread of the messaging across impairments that aren't just the easy to explain, visually obvious.
Talk to us a little bit about how you see media coverage getting it wrong when it comes to the Paralympics. So you just gave a great example in terms of the aperture of the type of athletes, of Paralympians who are being featured. What are the other ways that mainstream media gets it wrong, or things that you want to say, hey, this is not the real story. This is not how it is.
Firstly, I personally hate it when people are like, oh, they're so inspirational. It's inspiration porn does my head in. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here because I am a professional athlete.
Yeah, you're competitive.
I am the same as my Olympic equivalent. I just have an impairment. That means I do a slightly different version of the same sport. That annoys me. And I think the messaging about that is becoming better, that we are more professional and people have seen things move on. But there is still some of that there. everybody's looking for a backstory or a sub story or a overcoming adversity story. And sure, there is things to learn from a Paralympian's journey. I'd be the first to say I have learned resilience and how to not say no to stuff and just how to be bloody-minded and determined to achieve things. Of course, I want to inspire a kid with CP or a neuro-impaired person to go, oh, maybe I could try running. I want to create action to them and give them something to aim for, not be, ooh, this is amazing, look at this person. Isn't that nice? No, it's not nice. It's hard. And there's days when I don't want to get out of bed and days when I don't want to do a session or days when I've got blisters on my feet or I've fallen off my bike and broken something. And you know what? That sucks and is hard. That's what's inspirational. It's the perseverance and the aspiration to be the best at your sport, not the inspiration to be like, oh, bless them, they're still doing it.
100%. And that was exactly where I wanted to ask you about, because I've worked with so many different Paralympians who the first thing to say is hate inspiration porn. Totally aligned. Then I also have other athletes who say, but I do want to be an inspiration in certain ways. So that I completely am tracking everything you're saying. And I think it's an incredibly important distinction. Fran, I want to be mindful of your time. 2 final questions. One thing that we like to ask all of the athletes we work with is, if younger Fran was sitting next to you, what would you tell her?
Don't let what others either think of you, say to you, or think you can be define who you are. You are your book. You are your person. You write your own story. Everyone else is an influence in that, positive or negative, and that's for you to filter out. But don't let somebody else write your story for you or dictate how that should look. You're independent, and whatever that looks like, that's who you are. And learn your values and live your story.
Last question, and we like to end with this. What is one ask of our community you want them to take after they hear your story?
Take away the fact that Paralympians are working really, really hard. So it doesn't matter whether you came first or whether they come 50th. The same as anyone who makes the Olympics is an Olympian. Anyone who makes the Paralympics is a Paralympian. It's the same level of dedication, commitment, and work that goes into that. We all love seeing people with the Olympic rings. We go, I want to be that person. When you're at school, you're like, Steve Redgrave, I want to be him, or pick your sport. The same applies to the Paralympians. That person is no less of an athlete, a hard worker, a professional than those people. And just remember that when you see us on TV, that it doesn't matter necessarily. Yes, we want a medal. Yes, we want gold. But actually getting to the level where we get selected for a games isn't a given. And it's just as much work and just as much hard dedication as somebody who makes an Olympic qualifier or a final and doesn't medal. There's more Olympians that don't medal than Paralympians, and yet the focus tends to always be, especially at the Paralympics, on those that win one of those 3 coveted medals. And I think we forget the value of the dedication and hard work that goes into the whole field that reaches that pinnacle level of the game.
Thanks for tuning in to Flame Bearers Unedited. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a positive review on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube. If you want to see more behind the scenes coverage, follow us on social media. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, whatever platform you're on, we're there too. Thanks, and we'll catch you on our next episode.